Democratic State Senator Nathan Johnson of Dallas. Thank you so much. So yesterday you flew to Washington, D.C. When did you arrive exactly? And why did you go? And what are your goals?
Good morning, Jack. Thank you for talking with me this morning. I actually arrived near midnight on Monday night after a day of very serious deliberations about what was the best course of action for us as members of the Texas Senate. What are our goals here? You know, the calculation is, where can we be most effective? Can we be most effective in Austin? I've been arguing against most of the bills on this call, most particularly the bill concerning our elections. And I won't characterize it one way or another, but we've been arguing against these things for 6 months. We argued about some of them last session. They're going to be rammed through. You know what? We don't just leave town if there's a bad bill. We have plenty of bad bills. This is an extraordinary measure and an extraordinary moment. Because the House had already broken quorum, it really makes no effective difference what comes out of the Senate. I'm not saying that the deliberations down there are meaningless, because they are meaningful, but they're not going to become law because the legislature is not going to be able to pass them because the House won't come back. So right now, do I go back? Do I stay in Austin? Do I make the same arguments I made before, have this stuff rammed through as it is before, or do I come here and contribute to the national spotlight? Because the national spotlight does shine on Texas, and I will tell you that it is already having an effect. After the quorum break last session, this elections bill got much better, or should I say much less bad. There are valid measures. The bill is coming along, but it still, to this day, contains things that are completely unacceptable. Why such an extraordinary measure? Because we're not talking about attacks on transgender kids or high school curriculum or cities or any of those other extremely serious things that we have to face every day. We're talking about the foundations of our democracy. This is fundamental stuff. It requires our presence here to amplify the message, and it's having an effect.
Okay, so lots to break down there.
There's
As
more.
far as your trip to Washington, right now the U.S. Senate needs 60 votes to even begin a debate.
Yes.
There are none. So this isn't going anywhere just yet. So what are your goals in Washington to change that?
That's an excellent question. There's a couple. One is sort of from the procedural standpoint. We face this problem in our own Texas legislature very frequently. There's a very serious, important bill that cannot move. So what do you do about it? One of the things you can do is you can find elements that are acceptable. You can shape them into ways that are acceptable, and you can make incremental progress. Very often people get completely stuck on having the entire package. We are here encouraging people to examine individual elements. What can we get done? What are the other mechanisms? I'm not an expert in parliamentary procedure here in Washington. We're meeting with senators, representatives, members of the executive team, including the vice president yesterday. We're meeting with agencies. So part of it is, what can we do from a procedural perspective in the legislature? In addition, we are meeting with agencies, we're meeting with groups, the kinds of people who amplify the message nationally and locally in Texas. The effect of that has been positive. There are individual constituencies that have reached out to authors of the bill, proponents of the bill, made changes that make it better. So again, it is having an effect. Some of it's going to be short term between now and August, because this bill will be back in August. I will be there in August. But some of it is a longer term effect, shaping our dialogue. That's an important thing to do.
Let's go back and discuss some of the things about Senate Bill 1 that you said were unacceptable.
The one I find so offensive, I've had a couple of people who've worked at elections year after year for very little pay, really good Americans who don't want to do it anymore. Not because they're ever going to do anything wrong. They've never, ever done anything wrong. In fact, I'm not aware that anyone in the history of Texas has ever committed some sort of malfeasance as an election worker. In fact, I asked that question in Senate debate, and the answer is no. And yet we have criminal penalties now enforceable against people for not doing their job at the elections. Well, they're going to do their job, but what's to stop somebody from filing a lawsuit? Because this bill also gives individuals, any random individual, a private cause of action to sue an election official if they think they're doing something wrong. It refers them to the attorney general. So now we have layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of people coming after election officials. I've had people come to me and say, you know what, it's not worth it. I think that discourages participation in our democracy, not by the voters, but by the very people who need to run those polls. That's a bad atmosphere. When you put stuff like that into a bill, it sends a chilling message. I mean, we can look at specifics, and we are talking about specifics, but I also, just if you'll permit me, let me zoom out for a second. When you have a bill that begins with the presumption that there's widespread, meaningful, significant voter fraud, particularly in the absence of any evidence of that, you are not improving confidence in our elections. You're not making people have faith in results. You're telling people that there's something bad out there. You're stoking mistrust and hostility and anger. And in that atmosphere, you're going to have empowered partisan poll watchers. Pick a side, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, whatever, Green Party. You're going to have angry people there with cell phones all over. And can you imagine the atmosphere that creates? That's it's not nothing that we are fomenting that kind of atmosphere. Democracy would be something that we are all proud to participate in. There's nothing in this bill that encourages people to vote. I'm sorry, there is some expansion, and credit where it's due. They have, in the most recent version of the bill, expanded certain early voting hours, eliminated some barriers. There's progress coming along. But still, when we're attacking poll workers, when we're telling cities, here's another really egregious one. Harris County, most of the bill is designed to punish Harris County because a lot of people voted and they didn't vote the way that the proponents of the bill want. They have 24-hour voting. Now, is there more fraud at 3 a.m. than there is at 3 p.m.? I'm not aware that there is. In fact, the proponents of the bill don't even argue that there is. You know what they said? They said, well, it's hard to get poll workers at 3 in the morning. Why is that the state's business? Harris County, Dallas County, El Paso County, Travis County, Kaufman County, every county can make a decision, can figure out whether or not they can hire enough people to work through the night. If they can't, they don't do it. What business is it of the state trying to control them? This is a totalitarian approach of state control over local officials whose job it is to facilitate elections. It's intolerable.
When I asked the lieutenant governor about this and other Republicans, they said that they wanted to standardize the rules across the state, and they also said that what Harris County did in 2020 was not in the elections code. So Harris County was the only county that did that. No other county did it. So what about that argument that there should be a standardized method of voting rules across Texas?
Okay, as soon as we have a standardized population with a standardized economy, with a standardized demography, sure, we can standardize our rules. We don't standardize, there's a lot of things we don't standardize, right? We don't standardize the width of streets. Cities are cities and counties are counties, and they have institutions to serve their individual populations. Do we have people working the night shift in every city, in every county, in every locality? No. Do we have 5 million people in every place? No. I don't believe that's a genuine argument. I think they're looking for some way to come up with an excuse. It's not in the elections code. Look, when we write laws, we don't try to imagine every conceivable circumstance and write a line that says this works, this doesn't, this works, this doesn't. No, what happened to innovation? Harris County is coming up with ways that more people can vote. There's no evidence that there was any fraud. Terrific. I thought that's what we wanted. No, I don't think we need to be standardizing. We don't standardize business. Heck no, we want innovation. We want to find ways to get things to work better. So I think it's sending a bad message and pushing us in the wrong direction.
So let me ask you, to your point about being up at the Capitol, in the nation's capital today. But if you want to continue to, as you say, make progress on this bill, why not actually come back to Texas and try negotiating the measures in this bill?
We've been negotiating the measures in this bill since 2 years ago. And in respect to proponents and authors, they have listened to some things, they've made some changes, but I haven't counted up exactly how many bills were rammed through on a straight party line vote. There's not a meaningful dialogue if the Republican leadership of Texas digs in. There's not a meaningful dialogue at this point, right now, we will be back working in good faith. I get along great with my Republican colleagues. We have a lot of mutual respect. We've helped each other out on bills. We will continue to do so. We will be negotiating and having a discussion around this exact measure because it's going to be back in August. The House is gone. It can't pass the Senate. We are going to be back there in August. What I'd like to see in these negotiations, in these dialogues, and I think there's some hope, is provisions of the bill that will actually make it easier to vote, like online voter registration. My gosh, we can't do that. Surely we can do that. Let's send a message that we're serious about making it, people love to say easy to vote, hard to cheat, right? Yeah, let's make it easy to vote. This is making it harder to vote. Now, as far as the hard to cheat part, we've got so much evidence in Texas, outside of Texas, it's pretty hard to cheat. That's not a problem. So when we come back to the table, let's continue the progress. But right now, standing in Austin watching them ram this bill through us when it can't become law seems to me less productive than being here, again, amplifying the message and looking for ways that we can work with groups inside, outside Texas, the legislature in Texas, the legislature in Washington, try to get this done so we have a good, if we want to have a common message about something, let's have a common message of strengthening our democracy. We'll have those discussions.
Two other questions for you, Senator, and I appreciate your time. So as you know, the Texas Senate did have a quorum yesterday, did pass the elections integrity bill and some other measures. Will you and the other senators who flew to Washington face any consequences upon your return?
First, I want to comment on the title Elections Integrity Bill. I think that's a misnomer. Elections that exclude people or make it difficult to vote lack integrity. Things that discourage poll workers lack integrity. I'll call it the Elections Bill, but that's as far as I'll go. We're going to get to an Elections Integrity Bill, hopefully in August. Will we face consequences? There's consequences to every action. There's already consequences. There's people that don't understand what we're doing. Are we going to be arrested? Technically, we haven't. There's no quorum break, right? I'm just missing. I'm just not there, which, by the way, I don't take lightly. It's difficult for me to forego the opportunity to take on the bill's authors on the floor, to make my comments on the Senate floor. But there's dozens of hours of those kinds of comments already from last session. We'll be back to do it. Consequences, I'm not aware of any legal consequences. There could be political consequences, favorable and unfavorable. But, everybody has to live by the motto, do right and risk the consequences.
And my last question to you is, how did you get up there? As far as, were you on a private jet like we saw many of the House members? And also, a lot of people I've seen on social media are asking, who's paying for all of this? Who's paying for the airfare, whether you flew on a private jet or, commercial airline? Who's paying for your hotels? Who's paying for your meals, et cetera?
Right. I flew on a commercial jet. On a crowded plane in a crowded airport, and got in at midnight. Was not particularly luxurious, but I'm not complaining. The state is not paying for any of this. There's no taxpayer dollars going to pay for anything that we're doing here.
So who is paying?
It's political funds. This is a political purpose.
So Texas Democratic Party,
No, I don't want to get too much into specifics but every candidate raises money for political purposes. At the federal level, at the state level, Republicans raise money for political purposes. It pays for travel related to your political objectives. It pays for travel related to your legitimate political objectives and advancing the interests of the people of our state. This is our political funds being dedicated to that purpose.
So
money raised by candidates.
So money raised from your campaign and from maybe national or just donors nationally?
We'll see.
All right.
I mean, I don't know exactly where it's all coming from. It's political money that we raise. It's always kind of, almost all of the money that I raise is from people in my district and people from Texas personally.
And so you're using some of those funds along with whoever else is paying for this?
Yes.
Okay. Democratic State Senator Nathan Johnson of Dallas, thank you so much for your time, and we appreciate it.